Hi, welcome to the flowerseed.com podcast. I'm Dr. Sharon Furman, a clinical psychologist from Los Angeles, California. Today we will be talking with Gahl Sasson, an astrologer, numerologist, tarot reader, Kabbalistic teacher, and so much more. We will be talking about various topics about Israel, Judaism, the history of anti-Semitism, and so much more. Please enjoy. Talk to you soon. I have a few questions that I wanted to start with through the lens of your understanding of things. My first question was the idea of the Jewish people and their history of persecution. I know there's many groups that have been persecuted, but this is a particular minority of people that have been persecuted repeatedly over a period of time. And I wanted to get your thoughts about that and how that ties in or doesn't tie into this concept or idea of the chosen people and this land of Israel, of what they considered the promised land. I know that's a loaded question, but
Well, I think, first of all, in astrology at least, we consider Jews being associated with Capricorn, the Jewish people. I mean, Israel itself is a Taurus, so that's a different archetype, even though both of them are related to Earth. That's why there is something very fundamental and very karmic with Earth, the promised land, the land of the God supposedly bequeathed us, the whole idea of Abraham having to leave his home and go to the Wild West, westward. All of that idea is very much related to the archetype of Earth, and that is part of what is related to the idea behind Judaism. Now, the thing about the chosen people and all that, you have it in many different traditions. It's just that the Bible became extremely popular around the world, so that's why a lot of people know about it. But I doubt that there's any people out there that in their mythology basically, myth is a story of origin, that they don't have some proclamation of importance. That's almost like a mother tells his kid, you're great, you're the best. It's not because I'm your mother I'm saying it, it's because you really are. So it's the same thing with gods and their people. When I studied psychology, I had to join some kind of a research to kind of, you know how it is with questionnaires in order to get your degree. And one of them was actually an interesting questionnaire about cognitive dissonance, which is so prevalent right now on the planet. Everybody's suffering from it tremendously, especially in the last 10, 12 years, and it's probably because of social media. But the idea was to give people some kind of a question. One of the questions, do you believe in God? Do you believe in the Bible? Blah, blah. Do you believe that there was Mount Sinai occurrence, when Moses gave the Ten Commandments and so forth? And then it said the question, do you believe the Jewish people are chosen? And it was incredible how many people that said they do not believe in God, that they did not believe in the Sinai situation, the Sinai episode when God gave the Torah and supposedly proclaimed the Jews as special. Am Sgula. Sagol means purple, but it also means extremely rare. Maybe because purple was very hard to make. The Phoenician cracked it how to make it from little snails, and it was considered to be the royal color. So the royal people, in a way. And it's interesting that people that proclaimed that they do not believe in God, that they don't think that Mount Sinai ever happened, do believe that Jews are special. Why? Who chose you if you don't believe? So you'll see that there is some selectivity about what people believe in as a culture, as individuals. Now, I think with the issue with the Jews and anti-Semitism, I think it goes back a long time ago, because in the old world, when you were a pagan worshipping, Apollo in Rome, or let's say Artemis, or in Greece, when you go to China, to Egypt, Ah, you see Horus. That could be Apollo, the sun, and all that. Oh, there is Isis. Well, she could be Hera. There was some kind of a correspondence between deities in a way. But when you dealt with the Jews, they told you your gods are gone. Your gods are nonsense. They don't really exist. They're fake. There's only one God, and that God is our God, and his name is Yahweh, or whatever the name was, because it depends on where you were in Israel even. So that created a certain kind of antagonism, because you don't accept our God and you tell us to our face that our God is fake. Because as long as you have a polytheism, it's no problem, you can translate the name. But when you have monotheism, it immediately cuts the situation. The first monotheistic tradition actually is not Judaism, it's Zoroastrianism, which is in Iran. But the concept is that created, and again, that could be part of the reason why there also was so many wars between Persia and Athens again, and Greece again, because of that idea of difference in the way you look at the world. But any way you look at it, I think that part of the beginning of the anti-Semitism, you can say, is because of that, because it's very hard to translate our gods to your one God. And also there was a big issue after the destruction of the Second Temple, which people don't talk so much about, especially in Israel. We were taught that the temple fell because of, they call it sinat chinam, stupid kind of hate. But really what happened there is that they were fanatical, a minority that was very fanatical, that didn't accept the Hellenistic traditions, they didn't accept the rest of the way that other Jews decided to live their life, conduct their life, very similar to what's happening now in Israel. You can associate a very clear line between what they call the Kanaim, or the Zealots in the Second Temple, to Ben Gvir today and his Messianic jokers. So there is something interesting that happened after the destruction of the temple, because when the Second Temple was destroyed, then of course 135 there was another rebellion against the Romans led by Bar Kokhba, which was a complete disaster. And after that, the diaspora became very, very dominant, like people were scattered all over the empire. Now before that, Jews did live in different places. In Alexandria, that was the jewel of the Hellenistic tradition, 40% of the people were Jews. 40%, and you're talking about a big minority there. And of course there was the library, there was the center of science, astrology was developed by Ptolemy around that time, the 4 books that were written. It was a thriving time, and Jews felt very good in Alexandria. What happened after the temple was destroyed, all the crazy zealots started going to Alexandria, and then to Libya, and then to Cyprus, all the center of Jews, and steer them up and make them go against the Greek and against the Roman, which had a big backlash against it. And that's when it was even reported in Cyprus. People don't talk about it too much, but in Cyprus there was such a massacre of the Jews to the locals that after the Jews were expelled out of there, they said for 500 years, we don't want any Jew on this island. Even if a ship is wrecked and they come as refugees, we'll kill them. This is
Why
very,
did
very,
why did they
this
want
is
to kill them?
beyond anti-Semitism. Because of there was a massacre of the Jews of the locals. So the Jews massacred the locals. There's a
Oh,
lot of back and forth between the Jews and the Greek. It started in Alexandria, then they ran away to Libya, then they went to Cyprus, many different places where there were Jews. That's when it started. Now I'm not
but why were the Jews
saying,
killing them?
yeah, the Jews were slaughtering them. So
For
at
what?
that time, because of conflict, because of the influence of the zealots that came from after the
But we
rebellion
started it.
was
I mean,
gone.
I'm not saying the Jews started it in
Yeah,
that situation.
it's who started. You know how it works. They started, we started,
Yeah.
they started, they started. But the thing is that when the zealot, it's almost as if, heaven forbids, imagine Israel would be eliminated, and these zealots, these messianic people, will go to New York, Brooklyn, and start causing trouble there between the Hasidics, and make the Hasidic try to start killing people in Williamsburg because they're not keeping the Shabbat, because they're not good Jews. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying that all the anti-Semitism come from the Jews, but it's not also that the Jews were only victims. And later on, it became, of course, very prevalent with the whole story of the Jews supposedly being involved in the killing of Jesus, which is, of course, absolute nonsense because the
Right,
Jews
right.
did not have the authority to kill anybody nor to assassinate anybody. And they couldn't, I mean, this is all nonsense. But at least the Christian had a reason, because in Matthew it says that the Jews said to Pontius Pilate, kill him, sacrifice him, the blood is upon us and our children. And that's why every time there was the Passion of the Christ told in Passover or Pascha, of course the Jewish quarter was the target of massacre. You know, that's kind of the story of the golem, if you remember, from the Maharal, who built that golem in Passover in order to protect the Jews and the of Prague from of these libel, the blood libels. So, but if you look at Muslims, they also had mistreatment towards Jews, and we didn't kill Muhammad. But there was a big issue in Saudi Arabia between the Jewish tribes there that were very, very dominant. A lot of the Yemens at that time were Jews. There were very warrior tribes of Jews at that time in Saudi Arabia. So at first, Muhammad told his worshippers to pray towards Jerusalem. And after the Jews did not accept him, he started telling them to start praying towards Mecca, which is what we do today. But you see that there is something that is prevalent about that persecution, the persecution of the Jews, again, because they had a different way of looking at life, a different way of understanding things. And the minute you absorb the Bible, whether you're a Muslim and a Christian, and you see there that it says in one of the sentences that God chose the Jews as the chosen people, it creates also for them some kind of dissonance. That's why Paul, who was a fanatical Jew, had to say, well, the Jews were the chosen people until Christ came, and now Christians are the chosen people. So they basically pushed the crown to somebody else, the new Jews, you can say. And I think that after that, every once in a while, people that wanted to control chose to look at anti-Semitism as a good way to unite the people against a common enemy. Whether it's the Nazis, whether it's in the Crusaders, the Crusaders that they were supposed to go to Jerusalem, but they stopped in Ashkenaz in Germany and massacred the people there. You know, they also massacred later on the Christian in Constantinople. That's a different story. You know, when you go to massacre, you just massacre whatever is around, Christian, Jews, Muslim, it doesn't matter. But you see later on the protocols of the Zion elders, all of that. And every once in a while, basically, anti-Semitism is a form of hate. It can reincarnate into different modalities. So then you see later on places like Qatar and Iran that were giving a lot of money to universities in the United States. I mean, the number one contributor to universities, the Ivy League universities in the United States, is Qatar. And Iran, you know, so no wonder there was all these demonstrations where they didn't allow Jews to go from here to there. This is again cynical use of people. It's just amazing that universities that are supposed to be the crown of intellectual pursuit fell to this kind of manipulation in such a way. I mean, it's ridiculous. But I think that again, that's the cognitive dissonance. It's a little bit tough. And my feeling when I studied Kabbalah, what I've noticed is that Kabbalah was developed every time Jews had a big issue. Every time that cognitive dissonance hit the Jews. Because again, there's cognitive dissonance, of course, to everybody. I think it is the most prevalent disease, psychological disease we have as individuals and also as communities, being able to hold two concepts that are completely contradicting in our brain and see no conflict. That's cognitive dissonance, basically.
Right.
So a lot of time what you see is that in situations where the Jews were confronted with the fact that they are the chosen people, but bad things happen, wait, why did it happen to us if we're the chosen people? They're not chosen and they have a great life. Why am I suffering and I'm the chosen one? Let me not be chosen. You know, and I think it started already in 586 BCE when Babylon conquered Jerusalem. That was a big shock for the community because we were used to saying, okay, from the time of Solomon, supposedly, we don't have any proof to Solomon or David's existence, but it doesn't matter. The temple, the first temple, stood there, whoever built it, 500 years it was there, and it was considered to be the house of God. Nobody can kick God out of his own house. It's not like a landowner that can come and kick you out. But when the Assyrian came in 722 and conquered the northern part of Israel, they were about to go into Jerusalem, but because of internal issues that Assyria had, they had to return. Of course, the Jews interpreted it as, yeah, the 10 tribes can go to hell, but when it came to Jerusalem where God lives, God kicked the Assyrian out. Well, a few hundred years after, the Babylonian came and finished the job. So when the elite and people like Ezekiel were forced out of Jerusalem into exile, into Babylon, they started lamenting and crying in the rivers of Babylon and realizing we have a situation here. We believe that we're the chosen people. We believe that nothing can happen to the house of God, and yet it's in ashes. What is happening? We have to look deeper. What is deeper? To look into our soul. The same way that you as a therapist, people don't come to you when they're happy. I don't know a lot of people that come to therapy because everything is so good. I'm in love with life. I want to share it with the therapist.
I've never seen it.
When do you go? You only go when you have divorce. When you have a cognitive dissonant blow in your face. Oh, I thought she was in love with me, but now I found out that she has a lover. How can that happen? Okay, I need to go to therapy. So Kabbalah became the therapy of the Jews. Kabbalah means to accept. How can I accept bad things that happen, realizing that there is something bigger? The Babylon didn't really conquer us. We sinned. We had a bad attitude towards ourselves and towards God. So God used the Babylonians to get us. It's not that God was kicked out. Okay, so the whole idea of monotheism, that everything is part of the one, that even the Babylonians are servants of God in a sense, and everybody is part of that, that's the beginning of Kabbalah. Ma'aseh Merkavah, the working of the chariot, or the miracle of the chariot. That's the chariot of Ezekiel 1, when he sees a chariot coming from the sky, when he's at the rivers at the town called Tel Aviv, over in Babylon, and he's in the river of Babylon crying and lamenting for the destruction of Jerusalem. And that's when the chariot comes to him. He realized God is not in Jerusalem, God is on a chariot, and he can go anywhere. And that's why in Kabbalah, chariot equals meditation. When you meditate, God comes.
Pretty interesting stuff, don't you think? Interesting perspective. If you like it, please subscribe and like. Now let's get back to it.
One of the questions is the state of the world, what's going on right now, especially with the war or the supposedly ceasefire and all that. It's interesting how sometimes we have issues with people, how we have an issue with somebody in high school, we don't get along, and then suddenly we meet them again in university, or we meet them at a workplace, and it gets even worse. So the same way that you have karma with people, that you, in a good way, in a bad way, you meet them again and again. It's interesting how Iran or Persia has so much karma with Israel. If you think about it, we mentioned Babylon conquering Jerusalem, but the way that the second temple was built is that Koresh, it's a king in Iran that conquered Babylon and created the Iranian or the Persian Empire, that later on got into trouble with Sparta and Greece and so forth. That doesn't matter now. But that empire that lasted until basically the approach of Islam. So for almost 1,000 years, that was considered to be somebody who, by Judaism's point of view, was almost a Messiah. Iran and the Jews have a long history together. They have a lot of karmic connection. Already getting back to that story we talked about with the first temple, the second temple was built during the Persian Empire by the support of the Persian Empire, sponsored by. So it's kind of interesting that 2,500 years ago, the Iranians were not sending missiles, but they were sending exiles back to Jerusalem to build the second temple that Herod, of course, took to the next level. That Jesus came there, if you remember, because we're so close to Easter, and eventually the Romans, not the Romans, but actually the Jews burned it, and then the Romans destroyed Jerusalem. So it's interesting that we have some karma with that culture, and obviously in the 50s, 60s, it was the only Muslim country besides Turkey that was an ally of Israel. It's a natural ally. There is nothing antagonistic about it. It's also the two oldest monotheistic traditions. There is so much similarity between the cultures. There is absolutely no reason on the planet for them to be opposing. It just doesn't make sense. It's almost like lovers who heard bad, wrong news about each other and now are fighting, but really not really clear for what.
Why?
Now, the
Right.
war is interesting because right now in Iran's chart, she has two things. One of them, and I'm not talking about Iran as the culture because they can't do a culture for something that exists 2,500 years ago, but we can look at the moment that they declared themselves as an Islamic Republic in 79, and that made them Aries. And Saturn is in Aries right now, and Saturn is going to be on top of Iran's sun in May, in October, and in February. These are times that are considered to be the worst in a country because the sun represents the leadership, the initiation, the vitality. Saturn is oppression, challenges, difficulties. And that's interesting because it happens every 30 years. It's a big deal. I think this war has to do with that. So Iran is going to have a hard time in May, October, and February. That being said, Jupiter return is also happening to Iran. That happens every 12 years, and it's the best time in 12 years. And
Could
that's
that be
happening
like
right now.
regime change and not necessarily
No, because
war?
it's the good thing for the Republic of the Islamic Republic. It's not good for the Iranian people. So the
Oh,
Saturn on top of the sun is challenges to them. The Jupiter return is benefits to them.
I
You know,
see.
so I think that that's why they came out of this war, to be honest, winning. Because for Iran to come out of this war winning, meaning just to survive, if they just
Oh,
survive, they already won.
I see.
Two of the best armies on the planet, pull full force on them, and they are surviving, and they're inflicting so much pain, and they're causing the president of the most powerful country to cave down. I mean, it's obvious. They so far have won. That's their Jupiter return. But there could be ramification because Saturn is the Lord Karma, sitting on top of
Mm,
the Sun,
mm,
and Saturn is fallen. In Aries, there is a chance that there was enough damage to create some major change, but that will take a while. Now, this is all in the context of Saturn and Neptune being in Aries for the first time in thousands of years. I said last time it happened was when Hammurabi was giving his laws, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, when the alphabet, the phonetical alphabet was invented. That's why we're now in LLM mode. That's why I think that AI is going to take itself to the next level because again, the first time that last time these two planets came together, we had a big leap forward with law, the laws of Hammurabi, and Phoenicians invented the alphabet, the phonetical alphabet. So there's so much movement going on, and that's why I said in my 2026 book that we are heading towards the year where world order is completely changing. It's
mm-hmm,
changing inside of us, it's changing
mm-hmm,
outside of us. So
mm-hmm,
it's a time to accept all of that.
mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, I guess that kind of like answers my question about the idea of Zionism.
Well, I explained to people with Zionism, it's interesting because not all Jews are Zionists, not all
Right.
Zionists are Jews. Therefore, logically speaking, it doesn't mean that to be a Jew, you have to be a Zionist, or to be a
Mm-hmm.
Zionist, you have to be a Jew.
Right.
I think that it's clear that we had Judaism way before we had Zionism,
Right.
and so I think that a lot of people equate it together that if you're anti-Semitic,
Mm-hmm.
you're anti-Zionist, but there's a lot of Jews that are not
Yeah.
believing necessarily in Zionism.
Right.
I'm not a objective person. I grew up in Israel. My mother is born in Israel. I love Israel. I think Israelis are great. I hate the government right now. I think
Of
they're the
course.
worst people possible to run such a complicated land in such a complicated time.
Right.
And I'm very sad that a lot of people are supporting them.
Mm-hmm.
And about the movement, my parents are in their 80s. When I'm in Israel, we always go to demonstration because they see that the country that they build basically is being torn apart by
Yeah.
self
Extremists.
interests and people who are basically very close to just being evil or ignorant, as they would.
Power. Yeah. Agreed.
So I think that is happening is that a lot of anti-Semitic people that don't want to be called anti-Semitic because it doesn't sound good, especially in the left side,
Mm-hmm.
they declare themselves anti-Zionism. That's safe. Anti-Zionism actually makes me cool. It makes me connect to celebrities. It makes me a good leftist. So
Mm.
I think that that's almost like a trend more than anything
Oh,
else.
I see.
And I think that that could go away. And the fact that Israel is behaving the way it is, of course, is supporting their
Mm-hmm.
assertion that Israel is out of control. And in many way, it might be. But I think that some anti-Semitism, I don't think all of them, but some of them are just riding the anti-Zionist wave because it's just safer, more politically
Okay.
correct.
Okay. All right. What, and if you have a few minutes left, are you have any optimism about?
Yeah, I think that eventually all of this world order is going to make a place that's much better. Pluto did move into Aquarius, which is power to the people, but for 20
Mhm.
years, so the transition might take 20 years. But I
Mhm.
think that we're eventually get to a much better place. Definitely.
Okay. Well, that's a great place to stop, and let's keep that hope in our hearts.
Thanks a lot and good
Thank
luck with.
you. Thank you for your time and everything, and
Thank
all your
you.
wisdom. And talk to you soon, I hope. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.